Hi everybody, it's Monday, which means that I'll be reading the next chapter of my novel, Living Nightmare, which is the first in the series, The Other Side of Gifted. Last week I read chapter 7, in which Tobin found out that she was going on an unwanted lunch date with Ange and her uncle Travis. Chapter 8. I miss the fuzzy dreams from my childhood, where evil was a red smear with pointy ears. I cannot hide from the truth now. The red was not paint, and the screams were not songs. There are faces now, like last night's. A blonde woman was tied. She was dirty and terrified. Her whimpers punched a hole in my heart. When a door opened, a beam of light blinded her. Footsteps, cries, a blade against her neck. Mine, conquering skin. Dream journal. Tobin was going to puke. Anxiety had her stomach spiraling like a tornado as she trudged behind the others. She breathed in deep, hoping to keep from embarrassing herself. Dr. Dawson led their group toward the entrance to the fourth-floor ward. The doors had seemed like an unbreakable barrier in the past. Once a patient passed in through them, they would not be going out. She wasn't ready. Would never be ready. Tobin wiped the sweat from her forehead. Her subconscious mind warned her to turn around, to go back to where she was safe. There were too many unknowns. Where were they going? What if they ran into someone her parents knew? What would happen if they got into an accident or caused a scene? What if Ange walked up to a stranger and asked how they liked talking to animals? Bile rose as her panicked thoughts multiplied. I'll be okay, she told herself. It would be fine. They eat and returned. Nothing to it. She almost began to believe these words as the group started down a corridor. I'll leave you to it, Dr. Dawson said. Girls, enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you later. He left them before two sets of steel doors. Elevators, Tobin realized. Mr. Barton pushed a button. They waited. She took another deep breath. Don't puke. Don't puke. The doors nearest them opened. Someone's hand on her back pushed her forward until they had entered the small space. She didn't like it. Sweat purled on her upper lip. Her heart thumped loudly as she watched the doors close with a swoosh. Tobin stared at the metal doors as the elevator began its path downwards. She looked at the buttons marked with floor numbers, the red emergency stop button, the one to call security if there was a problem. Waves of nausea rolled inside her. She tried to focus on her breathing. Why was it so warm? Were the others as hot? She glanced at Mr. Barton and Madame Lacombe. They seemed fine. Ange was smiling, humming a song. Oh no, the elevator was shrinking. The red-brown walls were moving inward. Not good. What was taking so long? It was only 4 floors. Shouldn't they have reached the lobby by now? What if the elevator stopped? She glanced at Ange, who seemed fine. There was nothing wrong with the elevator, she told herself. She needed a distraction. Counting. Maybe if she counted, she'd stop freaking out. Maybe that would stop her from picturing the floor giving way and all of them plummeting to their deaths. Tobin swayed while counting. 1, 2, 3. A sharp jab in her side, courtesy of Madame Lacombe, cut her off at 28. The elevator had stopped. Mr. Barton was holding the door open with his hand, impatience darkening his features. Tobin mumbled an apology and exited, rubbing her side. They had made it. To where? A basement parking garage. She hadn't even known Mendwell had one. Her parents had parked on the street when they brought her, probably to make a faster getaway. The parking lot was creepy. The overhead lights weren't bright, and the place smelled of car exhaust, gasoline, and dirt. White lines decorated the pothole-covered ground, marking places for cars to park. Other than the distant sound of traffic, The place was dead silent. A dry hand grabbed Tobin's damp one. She almost screamed. It was Ange. The redhead grinned at Tobin and tightened her grip. They followed Mr. Barton and Madame Lacombe to an expensive-looking car. He unlocked the doors with a button on his keychain, then proceeded to open the back doors for the girls. Madame Lacombe took the passenger seat. Mr. Barton waited for them to buckle their seatbelts before pulling out of the garage. She made herself comfortable against the cream leather seats, resting her head against the cool window. Ange's flow of questions created a soothing background of meaningless noise. Tobin lost track of time. Her heart rate returned to normal, and she hovered between sleep and wakefulness, only opening her eyes when the car stopped. "We're here!" Ange clapped. Tobin squinted. They were parked in an outside lot. The July sun warmed her skin as she carefully climbed out of the car. She stood beside the open car door, taking everything in. There was so much color. The trees lining the lot were a vivid green, their trunks the color of rich chocolate. Pretty flowers in shades of pink and purple bloomed in clay pots bordering the dark gray stone of an impressive building. She looked up the endless canvas of blue sky. There wasn't a speck of cloud in sight. Ange came around to her side of the car and took her hand again. "Wow," she said, her eyes on the restaurant. The place was called Prestige. The garage sign was enough to make Tobin cringe. The word was written in red with gold highlights. The P was over the top with a twirling cursive loop. She and Ange weren't going to fit in. It was too... everything. Too rich, too fancy, too pretentious. Everything about this place, from the dark stone and clear glass windows showcasing elegantly decorated tables with white linen tablecloths and rose centerpieces to the people inside, screamed high class. Pizza Hut would have been a smarter choice. "Look how fancy," Ange said. "Can't wait to see inside." She started forward but paused when her uncle began to speak. "Ladies, this is not a place to misbehave." He eyed Tobin. Madame Lacombe fixed her suit jacket and smiled at them. Ange nodded. "We'll be good. Right, Toby?" Her uncle didn't seem to believe her. If you're uncertain of something, look to Madame Lacombe for guidance. Wait to be seated, and do not put your elbows on the table, or," he narrowed his eyes at Tobin, "slouch your shoulders." Lecture done, he walked to the front doors and pulled on the vertical metal handle. "Ladies first," he said. The madame led them inside. A black-suited man welcomed them from behind a wooden podium. He was handsome, Tobin supposed, with tousled sandy hair, green eyes, and a cleft chin. When he saw her and Ange, the unimpressed expression on his face ruined his kind greeting. This guy could use some of Mr. Barton's lessons, Tobin thought. He asked if they had a reservation, and when Mr. Barton gave his name, the man stood up straighter. A fake smile stretched his mouth before he asked them to follow. The restaurant was busy, and maneuvering around without bumping into seated patrons was difficult. Whoever designed the seating plan had left little room between tables, and Tobin was grateful when they reached theirs. The host removed the reserved sign from the tabletop and pulled chairs out for the women. When they were seated, he handed them each a thick, leather-bound book with a cushioned cover. Menus, Tobin realized. The book was soft beneath her fingertips, luxurious. She didn't even want to know what it cost to make. The host left them, promising that their waiter would be by shortly. Tobin shifted in her seat. Was it rude if she fixed her chair? She was sitting right at the edge of the padded cushion. The host hadn't pushed it in far enough. Mr. Barton cleared his throat. He was staring at her. What was his problem? He tilted his head to the left, and Tobin followed his gaze to Madame Lacombe. The woman took a rolled white napkin from the table and slipped off the deep red ring securing it. With a flick of her wrist, the napkin fluttered open. She draped it across her lap. Yeah, she got the message. Copy whatever Madame Lacombe does. Not wanting to risk a mess, Tobin didn't mimic the wrist thing, choosing to unroll the napkin before placing it over her thighs instead. Ange had no such worry. She eagerly whipped the napkin in the air, a giggle bubbling forth from her delighted face. Mr. Barton clenched his jaw. Tobin opened the menu to look at her choices. The first thing she noticed was that no prices were listed. How was she supposed to decide if she didn't know what the items cost? Ooh, everything sounds so yummy, Ange gushed. Do I gotta pick one? Perhaps I can recommend something, Mr. Barton offered. Would you? Oh, it would be like getting a surprise. Mr. Barton and Madame Lacombe shared a strange smile. A black-suited waiter appeared by Madame Lacombe's side. A white napkin hung over his left arm. The napkin seemed like overkill, and he reminded Tobin of a cartoon waiter, one of those snobby guys, nose in the air. Are you ready to order? The waiter asked. Mr. Barton nodded. Yes, we are. He placed both his and Ange's orders, Madame Lacombe following with hers. Then it was Tobin's turn. Shit, she wasn't ready. She chose the first thing her eyes landed upon. Chicken Caesar salad, please. She grabbed her water glass when the waiter left, not knowing what to do with herself. Tobin, Mr. Barton's voice startled her. She met his gaze. My niece tells me you've been at the Institute longer than she has. Yes, said Tobin simply. Play nice, she warned herself. Don't act up. He would get back to Dr. Dawson. Do you also have a special gift? The twinkle in his eyes made the blue paler, to the point of translucence. It unnerved her, as did his question. She took a sip of water. Gift? She glanced at Ange, who smiled encouragingly. Shit. Tobin's hands went to her lap. She began playing with the napkin. Yes, Angela tells me she sees what talents, shall we say, people have. He gave Ange an indulgent smile before returning to Tobin. She hinted that yours is quite fascinating. Did she? Her fingers worried the napkin. Stay calm. Tobin was saved by the waiter arriving with their meals. She hoped the food would distract him, but Mr. Barton had his eyes on her. Great. Perfect. Damn, Ange. This gift of yours, he continued, ignoring his steak. Apparently, it's very rare. I don't have any gifts. Tobin shoved a forkful of salad in her mouth and gagged. The chicken was dry, the lettuce soggy. She shoved in another forkful anyway. Now, that isn't true, is it, dear? He asked Ange. She preened under his attention. Oh, yes, Ange gushed. Toby's very special. She looked around the table to make sure they were listening. She sees the future. Shit. Madame Lacombe's eyes blinked in delight. Mr. Barton smirked. Tobin gripped her fork. Ignoring Mr. Barton's previous warning, she slouched in her chair. The future, you say? Madame Lacombe leaned forward. Do tell, Tobin. Do I win the lottery this week? Mockery was strong in her tone. Tobin ground her teeth together. The woman persisted. Oh, come on. Tell me. Tobin's sound was wilted and pathetic. Like her. Now, Madeline, we mustn't tease the girl, said Mr. Barton. Her gift doesn't work like that, Ange cut in. Tobin wished she'd shut up. It was her fault they were talking about this gift nonsense. Toby can't pick what she sees. It comes to her. Like she'll be sitting there and then poof, presto, abracadabra, she sees stuff. Tilting her head, she added, I think that's how it works. Poof, presto, my ass, thought Tobin. What meds were they giving Ange? Hallucinogens? She doesn't like to talk about it, Ange finished. Oh, that's not nice, is it? Tobin, you should share, Madame Lacombe pressed. Tobin had enough. Ange killed whatever nerves were keeping her quiet. I do not see the future, she said. Mr. Barton shook his head at Tobin. That's not what Angela says. What does she know? She lives in a mental institute. Tobin ignored the guilt she felt when Ange's face paled. Well, she should have kept her mouth shut. Mr. Barton tisked. That wasn't very nice. You've hurt your friend's feelings. He patted Ange's hands. Tobin shoved her chair back. She needed to calm down. She scanned the room, saw the sign for the women's bathroom, and walked toward it. Ange deserved it, she thought, weaving her way through the tightly packed tables. She knew how Tobin felt about the parrot crap. That was the end of Chapter 8 of Living Nightmare. Next week will be Chapter 9. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend and got to rest up and enjoy the nice weather. And I hope that your week goes by fast. And I'll see you all next Monday. Take care.